Okay, more coaching news here. Pete Carroll will be the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. It has been announced by Adam Schefter that he will join on a 3-year deal with a 4th-year team option, which is important when we talk about the Raiders because they currently have a lot of coaches under contract. Antonio Pierce is under contract. Josh McDaniels is under contract. And there's the John Gruden thing. It's never been officially announced what settlement they came to and what's going on there. I'm assuming he just got a payout and is not currently getting paid. But nonetheless, they've paid a lot of money for coaches and are paying a lot of money for coaches. So kind of finally need one to hit. Pete Carroll joins the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's interesting. For one thing, that division now, every head coach in that division has at least been to a Super Bowl. 3 out of the 4 have won. Somehow Jim Harbaugh has the smallest trophy case out of the bunch because he lost his Super Bowl. Pete Carroll won one and lost one. Sean Payton won one. Andy Reid's won a few. So definitely a lot of established head coaches in that division. Pete Carroll to the Raiders is interesting because the Raiders have, they've taken swings on head coaches. The one thing you have to say about them is they have not been one of these teams who says, well, let's try a nickel and dime and maybe find some cheaper option. No. They go out of their way to make sure that they can get a good head coach. They paid John Gruden a ridiculous amount of money at the time. Josh McDaniels was someone who was considered to be a good option as a head coach, even though that doesn't feel like that's the case now. They liked Antonio Pierce. The fans fans liked him, and the players really liked Antonio Pierce. But I almost wonder if going with Pete Carroll, it's interesting because he doesn't necessarily have the best reputation with some of his former players. There are some Seahawks players who kind of got frustrated with Carroll the more that they played under him. But maybe that's what they feel the team needs right now, is they need more of someone who can establish a winning culture. We always talk about winning cultures when it comes to this stuff. Pete Carroll has been doing this for a long time, and you wonder if, while maybe some of the X's and O's got stale in Seattle, one of the big criticisms that people had with him was when Russell Wilson was playing at his best, people felt like Carroll and the Seahawks didn't get the most out of that for a while. Obviously, Pete Carroll is a defensive-minded head coach, but still, you're the head coach, so you're hiring the offensive coaching staff as well. You're still kind of in charge there. People also had some criticisms of this, the sort of Seattle cover 3 zone maybe getting a little bit stale, even though he did mix things up towards the end. But still, those were kind of the criticisms. But looking at a move like this, you can't help but make the comparison with his former defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn and Pete Carroll won a Super Bowl back in 2013 together. Dan Quinn then gets a job with the Falcons. It goes really well for a bit and then ultimately falls apart. And, very, very similar to how that Super Bowl went for Dan Quinn. Very well for a bit and then falls apart. But he gets fired by Atlanta. He becomes a defensive coordinator for a couple years. Washington hires him, and then it shows like, oh no, like building a winning culture is something he can still do and he's still capable of. Just because he didn't win a Super Bowl with his last job doesn't mean he's not a good coach. It seems like the Raiders are going with a similar approach, which there's kind of 2 ways to look at this. One issue that people have with a move like this is, we've seen it happen time and time again where, like John Fox or Lovie Smith, where you get these guys who you're like, well, they've had success somewhere else. Jeff Fisher being another one. You've had success somewhere else, or I think Jeff Fisher just stayed on for a while, but you get the idea. Jeff Fisher made the Super Bowl with the Titans and then joined the Rams, who beat the Titans in the Super Bowl. I'm getting sidetracked. You have these established coaches that you get other opportunities because they've had success, but the issue is they lost those opportunities and got fired for a reason, right? Pete Carroll ultimately, I think it was mutually parted ways, but ultimately was let go of Seattle for a reason. So that's the negative side. The positive side is kind of what I'm saying. You are getting an established coach who could give you a higher floor. And maybe you don't win a Super Bowl with Pete Carroll, but right now the Raiders need to get back into winning playoff games. I mean, the last time they won a playoff game was 2002 when they won the conference championship game to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, that's kind of a crazy stat to think about. Now, Derek Carr got hurt one year, they probably would win a playoff game, or at least had a good chance to win a playoff game if he was healthy. They came very close to beating the Cincinnati Bengals in the wild card round, a few years ago with Rich Bisaccia. Like, still, they need to be doing that consistently instead of once in a blue moon. And Pete Carroll, for all his faults, even in Seattle, was a consistent playoff team. He also made some bold decisions that worked. I mean, he was reportedly kind of behind the move to move off of Russell Wilson and roll with Geno Smith, a move that definitely worked for Seattle. So there are some positives with Pete Carroll. Again, I do find it very fascinating. One thing we have to mention as well, not exactly the youngest coach in the league. He is 73 years old. Doesn't look it, though. He is in very good shape, though. So maybe, not 73 is not the same for everybody. But still, I mean, you don't know how many years you're going to get, but maybe that's a good thing for the Raiders. It's a 3-year deal with a 4-year option. Maybe he coaches for 3 or 4 years, turns you from, right now, I don't want to say a mess, but it's not too far off from a mess if it's not, turns you from a mess to potentially just like a quality, good team with a good organization. Then maybe you can hire somebody else kind of within to maybe get you over the hump. Maybe that's the current plan right here. So either way, again, we'll see how it works, but like, there's certainly a lot worse you could do than Pete Carroll. I think you could argue there is better, or at least guys with higher upside. Do I think Ben Johnson has a higher upside? Sure, but also the Bears paid him a ridiculous amount of money, right? Like I said, the Raiders kind of already have their, hands tied up with this stuff. So I'm not sure how much that was going to happen. Also, what's interesting is kind of my last point is Tom Brady apparently was, he's a minority shareholder in all of this. So, he famously beat Pete Carroll in a Super Bowl, but he still clearly likes the coaching enough to sign off on this. I imagine he had something to do with it, right? So that's interesting as well. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, I'm not mad at this move. I'm really not. I think that it's again, I get why they're doing it. The Raiders kind of need a culture guy. Like, sure, you would love to have the good X's and O's guy, but like, right now you need a culture guy. Pete Carroll should be able to do that. So I'm not going to crush it too much. Before I go, I will mention I do have a movie channel. If you like movies, want to hear my thoughts on movies, you can check that out. The link is in the description below. I just did some Oscar stuff. I do some film reviews and things like that. So if that seems like your kind of thing, definitely check that out. The link is in the description below. Jackson Kruger movies. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Pete Carroll going to the Raiders. Almost all the jobs are taken now. Only a couple left. So been a very, very, very eventful coaching cycle, I would say. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Pete Carroll. What are yours? Let me know in the how did I take so long to get to this? I just remembered the last second. Pete Carroll versus Jim Harbaugh twice a year again. Remember, they had their whole feud from back in the day. Oh, that's fantastic. Now I'm excited. But yeah, okay, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from ya. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.